Welcome to Creators Cafe. I'm your host, Jessica Payne. I'm a performer, performance coach, and multi-hyphenate creator. I'm going to be bringing you conversations with some of my favorite creators where we talk about the sublime and the specifics of the creative journey. So grab a drink, get cozy. Let's go. My guest, Paul Perri, is an actor, director, and teacher. He got his start at Gielgud and was in The Bacchae, Macbeth, and A View from the Bridge on Broadway. Paul replaced John Malkovich in the leading role of Burn This on Broadway. And when they played poker backstage, Paul's poker name is Spike. Paul plays against Christian Bale in the movie Vice. He's in films with Stallone, Snipes, and Bullock. He was the lead in a film where they shut down part of Times Square for him to act. Paul is in movies like Hellraiser, Manhunter, Freeway, and the Hannah Montana movie. He's been in so many fun TV shows, I can't even list them all. Check him out on IMDb. It's a huge list. But my personal highlights are things like Battlestar Galactica, ER, Seinfeld, NYPD, CSI, Caprica, and The West Wing. He's a wonderful teacher and director who excels at getting actors out of their head and into the moment. We have a conversation that goes all over the place. We swear a lot. It goes dark and deep and wide and shallow and silly, and I don't think we come to any conclusions, but I really enjoy the journey. Please enjoy my fantastic conversation with Paul Perri.
Go.
Welcome, Paul Perri, to Creators Cafe. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yay. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking this coffee you got me, which is actually quite good. Okay. Where's it from?
Dialogue Cafe.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's good.
It's great. It's wonderful.
I've got a nice latte from there.
Okay, now that's it. I've shot my bolt. I'm done.
No, you got to keep talking.
All right,
sorry.
All right. Well, then you're going to ask me a question.
I'll do my job.
Okay.
So how do you think about yourself as a creator and as an artist? So you've used words like actor, teacher, director. Is there anything you want to add to that? Or is there kind of a way that you primarily think of yourself as a creative person?
It's funny because I think you always end up comparing yourself to everybody else. At least I do, obsessively, which is a problem. And in the end, it has nothing to do with anybody else. Being creative, here we are. We're in the arts. I teach the arts. I've been in an art form for a billion years. There are times when I am doing something when I stop thinking about myself. And I suppose that's being creative. Because everything else is this burden you carry around. Everybody's got the burden of themselves. Everybody's got this individual that they're inhabiting, and you gotta get rid of it. You gotta get away from it to do anything. Right? And if you're forced to, you do. If you've got some horrible job that you've got to complete, you're not thinking about yourself. You're just trying to get the job done. If you've got to negotiate with someone, if you've got to get someone else to do something, which is how we spend our lives, by the way, and is the root of all acting, you're not thinking about yourself when you're doing it. You're just thinking about what you want. Or you're thinking about the tactic, the task. Right? And for my money, that's the best thing. Everybody, because in the arts, and especially with acting, it's a spectator sport, meaning that people approach it from the side of being an audience. And that's a hard thing with young actors, is because your standard issue 20-year-old actor actually knows an enormous amount about narrative. Yeah. They have hundreds of thousands of hours of it. They've been watching it, but they've been consuming it. They see it from the audience side, and that's how they understand it. And they don't understand the mechanics of telling a story from the other side, from the storyteller side. But if you're telling the story, none of those rules apply. As a matter of fact, the less you're in it, the better. Or that version of yourself that you live with, that like I look in the mirror and I think, oh fuck, oh god, what happened? Oh my god, right? Because I walk around thinking it's 1989, and that's simply this image, this little icon, what do you call them? Avatar of yourself. Everybody has an avatar of themselves, right?
Yeah.
You walk around with, and it's got nothing to do with anything, right? And when I'm working, and I do other stuff, I spent my adult life working with. Physically working with my hands also.
Because you're a master carpenter. I'm
not a master carpenter. I'm a B+ carpenter who used to be a A- carpenter. But I did it for many years, and I did it for money, and I always found, and it's a job, and but I found that there was a head you'd get into when you were doing it. There was a self. You're standing there and you're doing something and you're figuring it out and you're prioritizing and you're doing all the things you have to do to do that activity. And that self is different self. And then you come into the arts. So I'm an actor. I'm going to do this. I've got to do this. All of a sudden, all this dealing with the attention and dealing with what it means to actually do that outrageous thing. It's an outrageous thing to be an actor. It runs against a lot of, it runs against human nature, actually, which makes you come totally, utterly self-conscious in a very negative way.
Okay.
Right? To the extent that the only way you can deal with that is by aggressively going after the person in front of you or aggressively going after the audience. This whole notion of like, the method and all that stuff, which is incorrect, by the way, of being inside yourself constantly, won't get you anywhere, won't do anything,
You talk a lot about, in acting theory, acting at the speed of thought.
Yeah.
And I think that's really related to what you're talking about. Can you explain how you think about that or what that means to you?
I simply, I've got all these kids in front of me all day long. And the first thing they do is they put these huge pauses between every line, and it kills every scene you do. You have no idea what the scene is. You have no idea.
Because they feel like they're feeling into it and being dramatic.
But there's a tradition of it, which is the actor pause.
Yeah.
And indeed, that a lot of people will accept that as, they're acting, right? But if you take the thinking out of it, if you take that, and what happens is people take a pause between lines because they're waiting for God to come down and tell them what the fuck to do, or something, or indeed it's how they learn the lines.
With the pause, because they're looking at the line.
Because you're waiting for your brain to come up with the next line, right?
Yeah.
Which means but we're trying to get the audience to believe that we don't know what we're going to say until we say it. But if you do it at the speed of thought, meaning you just take the air out, you don't have to speak faster. If you do it at the speed of thought, two things happen. First of all, your partner has to respond right away. And you respond to them right away. And so the ball is always coming and landing in your court and landing in your court and landing, and there's no time to think about how I should act this line. You're just reacting or you're changing the other person, which is very good. And the other thing that it does is that if you're used to the pause, this is what you think acting is, all of a sudden this conversation that you're having, which you've memorized, starts to feel, at least somewhat to the actor, as if it were reality. Which it's not reality. This is not about realism. It's not about reality anyway. And that's really good, because if you can create for yourself in the moment of acting something, any kind of authenticity, it gives you power, right? Because you walk out on stage in front of give me a number, any kind of
2,000 people,
2,000 people, or 30 people, or something, and everybody feels like a fraud. Everybody. It's human nature to feel like a fraud. And you have to either out of anger or out of anything find a way to feel authentic. If you feel authentic, then you can do something with them. And then all kinds of other stuff kick in. You can use the energy that's coming at you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, at school, the notion is they're going towards film and they do all this camera stuff, all of which is very, very valuable. But all of us old farts, we all came out of the theater and we all wanted to be movie stars. We all wanted to think, we like, oh my God, right? Everybody wanted to come to LA and be in front of a camera. Well, it's a different animal. And some people are more suited to it than others, and ways of thinking and ways of doing things are suited to it more than others. But the difference between walking out on a stage and staying there for 20 minutes and doing whatever and doing that much material in front of a camera is vast. They're both absolutely legitimate, but they are not the same thing.
Okay, so you've been on Broadway, you've been in major films, and you've done a lot of TV. When you enter those different mediums, how do you think about approaching that medium?
If you're in front of a camera, a lot of it you've just, first of all, it's here, and so, talk softly and think big, right? And also, for me, always, and this is my proclivity and my training, everything comes from the words. A lot of people not let this way, but if I have a script really down, that gives me a sense of authenticity. I feel like I have some kind of power. I have something to do. And I've learned more about this as directing than acting. Actually, is what an actor is in space in a theater. It's very to use an actor straight up alone in an empty space, because the technology of film and the technology of TV and all that stuff is obvious. It's not obvious. It's quite complex, but it's out of the actor's hand mostly. But if you think about what the technology of theater is, it's the building, it's the architecture, right? You are in a space with your audience. In an old-fashioned house, old-fashioned theater, like by this I mean a Broadway house style thing. Well, right? Which
stage
is
at the front, proscenium.
Yeah. But and that kind of theater has only existed for like 300 years or so, right? That's actually two buildings. There's the theater house where the audience sits, and they are looking through a hole cut between two buildings into the other building, which is the stage house, which is, the old ones are tall because they had scenery come up and down.
So
right?
Just literally the fourth wall.
It's literally a fourth wall.
They're taking it away.
In the old days when they were made of wood and had gas lights, there was the asbestos, which was the curtain could be dropped in case one side caught fire. Right? All of that stuff, and a lot of those buildings still exist, and we still perform in a lot of them. And then there's all the other styles, and all those other styles, three-quarter thrust, theater and around, are older than that, way older than that, right? We were just in Sicily and Malta, and we were looking at it, and I realized I could write this trip off because we kept going to theaters and looking at like, this is a Greek theater, and it's 2,000 years old, and they were all built for direct address, actors facing downstage theater.
This summer we went to France, and my family way back in the 1600s is from France,
of
and
course,
we went to. Oh, thank you.
But that whole, that whole thing.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, je ne sais quoi. Yeah.
Nice. So we went to this small town in the middle of France, southern France, called Orange, and there's a Roman theater there that is from over 2,000 years ago, and just realizing like my ancestors, this was like the major event in town, probably were in that same space. 2,000 years ago just gave me chills. It's
cool.
So incredible.
It's way cool.
But just to see that we're still doing, it looks very much like the Hollywood Bowl, in a lot of ways.
Those things don't change. And that's why it takes me back to the technology of architecture.
Yeah.
Right? And what is it to be in the same space with somebody?
Yeah.
Right? And even more, light, sound, all the things you can do with projections and in a modern theater, that is a very interesting relationship.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the direct address to the audience when that actor kind of turns out and talks directly to us or to the space. And your directing of actors to do that is the best I've ever seen. That is like
a nice thing to say.
It's true. It is a hallmark of your work that you teach young artists how to own that space for themselves in a way I just have never seen anybody be so successful at. How do you do that?
Well, I'm sure as an actor I was guilty of this too, but the first thing an actor wants to do, and maybe is they want to get too close, right? Yeah. Especially if the scenes are, and the closer you get in a space, the more it stops meaning anything. Also, the other thing is you get two actors and they're having a conversation back and forth, and they're in profile.
Yeah.
Which is so boring.
Yeah.
Right? And
sorry.
That, exactly. This, I'm looking at the thing.
Yeah.
So there are all these. So if you're going to be the traffic cop side of directing, which is the blocking, right? Which I'm aggressive. The thing in school is there's this whole school of thought is in acting class or anything, even with especially with the young ones, you're supposed to let them find their way into that. And I don't. I can't. I direct them. Mm-hmm. I mean, my acting classes is basically me directing the scenes. Mm-hmm. And out of that, I'm trying to show them values and what are we talking about here and what do you want and all that stuff. Now, if you can come up with another way to do it, fine. But I give them a very end product kind of framework for it. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm always looking for ways. I said, you can't, no matter if you're going to do a scene from a play, you've got to respect the technology, and by respecting the technology means you're in the same room with the audience. Mm-hmm. It's not reality. If I mean, this is being filmed, right? Yeah. But if I've got the two of us on, and if we were shooting this more, there's a camera. If we were shooting it a little more. With another camera and a little more, when this thing gets a little bigger and you actually have some production value.
Accepting production partners now.
Yes, okay. We might be two cameras.
Or three cameras, ideally,
so we can do that, which is simply film stuff.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Right. So, and that's like when we watch TV, we see this wide shot that we would have here, but then there would also be a camera over there that looks at me and one over here that looks at you. And that's how the editing comes together. But on stage.
But on stage, you've got to, if you don't give it to the audience, if you don't teach the actors to give it to the audience or have it, and forget about being real or truthful. It doesn't work.
Well, because...
And so I direct them to turn out. I direct them to have one person drift upstage and another person to look off. Whereas in reality, nobody would ever do that. But in the theater, it's accepted. An audience accepts it because you're talking to them. You're telling them the story, right? And so what that gives you is it gives you both faces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and I do that obsessively because I can't stand profile, and I can't, and it's got to satisfy. By satisfying that, their acting gets better. I mean, this is what you have to do. Everything else, you're going to send them into the weeds. And like I'm teaching directing right now, which you probably did a lot better than me. And the way they talk to each other. And I have kind of a rap, which is like, don't be so nice to your actors, right? Because, or rather, be more specific with your actors, because they want to say, oh, I really thought you were on it in that beat, and just try a little more, and it's all of this kind of generalized stuff. And I'm saying, are they, what is the story? What do they want? Are they getting it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know that sounds so reductive and it sounds so basic, but it's amazing. If it's working, you leave, you don't say a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
There's the poet Rumi said, before you speak, let it go through the three gates. Is it
What are the three gates?
True? Is it necessary? And is it kind?
Yeah.
And I think with directing, a lot of times our instincts as beginning directors is to be kind at the
which is beautiful.
Price of true and necessary, but that's,
it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, but I think you can be kind and true and necessary. And a lot of times people need, there's a reason the director has a job. Like, they can't see everything from the inside, so they need your help, and they need your outside opinion.
There was this guy, Roy London. He coached all of these movie stars. He did all this stuff, and he was this interesting man, fascinating man. A great acting teacher. And that whole concept of you are always creating the other person to be the thing you need them to be comes from him. And that was something I had never heard from anybody. It was always about what's going, right? But and what was wonderful about it was it completely takes you out of yourself. You're just operating.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is if you look at our crazy lives like you, right? You're always operating.
Okay.
You're always functioning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So people want to put emotion into acting and they want to put thought into acting, but they don't want to put function into acting.
Just the
they don't want to put action into acting.
Yeah, right. It's kind of in the word.
It's in the word. And
act.
And so that but the minute you really start thinking about that,
okay,
where you don't have to worry about the other shit, it actually opens it up and it also, you don't have to be worthy anymore. You just have to be, I want this, I need this, or I'm going to do this. Who gives a shit why?
I think there is something about wanting to be an actor is such a weird thing as a human, and we all do it for our own personal reasons. I think I feel like I live a bigger life experience as an actor, and I understand myself and others better, and so it feels like I get, 1,000 lifetimes in one.
I know, and the trouble is that you have to, you spend a lot of I'm on the far side of it now, but you spend a lot of time wondering why the hell I'm doing this. And it doesn't matter why you're doing it. And there are plenty of people who are going to talk about that, and there's plenty of things, and your reasons are your reasons. And you might, if you really examine what your reasons are, you might not like them, right? You're getting all the attention you didn't get when you were, all that crap, right? And there are patterns, and there is a kind of community based on that. Like to like, and we understand each other. We see ourselves in each other. But it's
the weirdo in me sees the weirdo in you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that what you've got to be careful that it stops being you can't have it just be a psychological type. You can understand it that way, and if you get into directing, of course, you're looking at that all the time because you've got to deal with the people. But, and you're often dealing with the psychology of the actors you're working with, and they're dealing with yours. But there is that line that you walk between how do I bring myself, or why am I doing this, or how do I do this well? How do I be present acting something? Because it's terrible hard. We don't get to dissociate. If you were a cello player, you could dissociate. You put the cello in the cello case, right? You're the cello. That's the problem, and so that means that if you really examine it, everybody would run screaming from the room because I don't want to think about myself. I don't want to constantly judge myself. Am I good enough? Now some people do, and some people have egos big enough or are crazy enough And we all know a lot of people like that, some of whom are quite successful, and that's part of it. Mm-hmm. So it's a craziness. You don't want to know them. You want to see their work, right? And it's funny, the kids I see at school, they have to, if you're going to do this, if you're going to be an actor, you have to be ambitious. I mean, you have to truly be ambitious. You have to be, and some people are real jerks about it, but it is that. And I suppose some people are so attractive that they can take that ambition and make it look like something more. Ambition isn't pretty. Ambition isn't charming. It's ambition. And it's personal, and it's like, and it's good. And if you can put it into your work, if you can be ambitious for your work, as opposed to ambitious for your career, if you make your career something that somebody else gives you, or the world gives you, then that can be almost reasonable, and then maybe you can be some, but there's so much, we're sitting in the middle of Hollywood. I mean, think about it.
It's a silly life.
It's silly, but Raymond Chandler, who was one of the great middle 20th century writers, early middle 20th century writers who wrote in pulp novels and stuff like this, but they're high art, they're great literature, said of Hollywood, and he was here, he was in LA, that screenwriting and the movie business separates a writer from their subconscious. And it'll kill you eventually. Right? And so there is this kind of, and he of course was that was the height of the factory system here, but also just that notion of the commoditization of entertainment and art and glamour and sex and all that stuff, which is what this neighborhood was built on. I often tell the kids, I said, you are sitting where you're sitting now in that chair, within a 30-mile radius of where you're sitting is the largest concentration of English-speaking actors on the planet, which is right, actually. I mean, there's 100,000 SAG members in this county out of 180,000 total.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's all of that, whatever the hell that means. And it doesn't mean anything.
We put meaning on it, yeah.
We put meaning on it, and we it's because it's our thing.
Yeah.
Right? But shit.
Okay.
What?
So I think you have such an interesting perspective on all of this, because you've actually been in the thick of all of this. I have to brag about you for a second to give people context. So starting with being at Gielgud, in class and in productions with incredible actors, including yourself and Robin Williams, who you did touring shows with. And then spending...
I never toured with him, but
you did shows with him, right?
I did show with him. Yeah, I did 2 or 3 shows. I did 2 or 3 shows with him. Yeah. I mean, it was a small class.
And then going to New York and having the opportunity to be in Broadway productions and working on A View from the Bridge and
looping porno movies.
Did you really?
Oh yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Actually,
but
I think I scandalized. I told that story to Suzanne, and I think I scandalized her the other day.
Sorry, Suzanne.
Yeah.
I just assume you've had a lurid and exciting past.
Well, it wasn't lurid. It wasn't particularly lurid or exciting, except it was kind of funny. I mean, and the other thing is look, we're in the storytelling business, so you're always looking for a good story. I come from, I don't know. I always think all families are like this, and they're not. I come from people who tell stories. That wasn't their business, but that's what they did. You couldn't go to the grocery store without coming back and hearing this 3-act play where you act out 4 parts. That's how people talk.
Yeah.
And so you end up with this notion of what narrative is.
Yeah.
And you're attracted to it.
Yeah. Right? And it feels natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, my mother's father,
Okay.
and this is before deregulation, so it's before 1960, owned a transfer company, a trucking company that had one of the 2 theatrical licenses for the state of Connecticut. And every single show that went through the Schubert Theater, which is the last stop before Broadway. And my mother loved the theater and saw all those shows.
Oh, wow.
So every show that went through the Schubert, which was, when they took a show out of town.
Yeah.
Right? Well, the last place was New Haven, Connecticut, because it's
absolutely.
one more jump into New York.
Yeah.
And so every show that previewed in New Haven, which was all of them, between 1929 and 1960, my mother saw.
Wow.
And she took me to the theater and all this stuff. And my Sicilian grandfather loved actors, and he loved all that. He knew Bojangles. He knew Bill Robinson.
Wow.
And he knew Joe Yule. Joe Yule was Mickey Rooney's father,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
who was a vaudevillian, and he did all the vaudeville and he did all the Broadway.
Wow.
That was great.
Okay, so you've got it in your blood.
Yeah.
You go to Juilliard. You go to Broadway. You replace John Malkovich, right?
I replaced John Malkovich I was
Burn
actually,
this.
I was John Malkovich's understudy,
Yeah.
which was a very big moment for a lot of reasons, because Burn This ran for a whole year.
Yeah.
And I married the stage manager.
Great year.
A great year. It was a great year.
That's a great year.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
We had such a good time. I was also drinking like a fish, but we had a great time. And John Malkovich was to be replaced. There were a male and a female star, and she won a Tony for it. And they had their contracts were up at the same moment, and so they had to replace them because it was a success. And Joan Allen. Joan Allen.
Yeah.
So if they had replaced Joan Allen with a female star, they would have given me John's part. But they couldn't find anybody who wanted it because Joan had already won the Tony for it.
Got it.
And also, it's not a good part. It's off, all of her actions off stage, and this other character, the John Malkovich character, comes on and you just steal everything. And it's like it's fabulous. It's exactly the kind of part you want, which is somebody else is out there killing themselves carrying the play. You come in like 4 or 5 scenes and you just take the whole thing and then get off. It's fabulous, right? And so they replaced Joan with her understudy, who is Lisa Emery. She was young and beautiful. This is like 1988. And she was killer. And so she was Joan's understudy, right? And so they had to replace John with a star, and they got Eric Roberts.
Okay.
And Eric had a lot of issues, and had a hard. And among them was he wasn't a particularly verbal actor. He was physical, visual actor, and had hard. And the part is extremely verbal, and very specifically verbal. It's like a big Shakespeare part, which John was great at, and I had fun with.
Yeah.
And Eric was having trouble, and they were coming up on the replacement night, and he wasn't ready. And so the producer came to me and said, listen, we want to give you the part. We're going to put your name on the marquee. We'll give you the money. You get to start dressing room, but as soon as he's ready, you have to step back, and you can. And I said, and so how it turned out was I'd go back to being the understudy. So. And I remember I went to see my shrink in the morning, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock, and I walked into 45th Street, and I was sure that they will have spelled my name wrong.
Yeah.
And there it was.
Wow.
Spelled right, and it was above the title on what was then the Plymouth Theater, is now the Schoenfeld, 45th Street, right?
Wow.
Right. So and it was.
Wow.
So I got to play it that many times.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it was beautiful because I had been rehearsing for a year, or not a year. I've been rehearsing for 5 months with Lisa.
Yeah.
So it was no problem. It
was great.
Yeah, we were great.
Oh, wow.
But it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And that first performance, 30-something years old, I had been working forever. I had done big parts. And I wasn't scared. I was terrified.
Yeah.
And I was standing there, and figured out how much time before I had to go on, and I made the calculation in my mind, how far away from this theater can I get before I had to make that entrance, literally. And I thought, okay, I'm on 45th Street. I could get down to the Port Authority. If there's a bus, I could be in New Jersey before, right? I mean, I actually had that, right? And then at a certain moment, I moved into the stage left wing, and Michelle will call the show from the wing, and Payne has to come through the door, right? And and I had never been that scared. And part of it, I realized, and this I suppose is the point of the story, was it wasn't just me, Paul, actor, being anxiety ridden because of a job or because of something you had to do or a difficult part or something. I had internalized the part.
Oh.
Payne has been driving around all night, coked out of his mind. His brother died, and he's in terrible grief.
Wow.
And he's gone back to where he lived. He's comes from this sort of mobbed up family in New Jersey, and they talk like the Sopranos. And his brother, who was gay and a dancer, was living in this loft with this woman choreographer. And Lanford had written it for 4 men.
Oh.
Originally.
Okay.
And he needed a Broadway hit, and this was 1988, so it had to turn it into a woman.
Got it.
And his grief, and it was anger, and he was stoned out of his mind. And there's this moment where you start, and also the other thing is, what stage fright is adrenaline.
Yeah.
You have to sit with this adrenaline in your body, and you can't fly, and you can't fight.
Yeah.
Right? And precisely why I was thinking about the bus station.
Yeah.
And so the cue came up, and Michelle changed the lights. I could see her peripherally, and I started banging on the door. He's right, which makes no sense because anybody banging on that door, nobody would open it, right? Bang on the door, bang on the door, right? And Lisa opened it. I went out on stage, and I remember the first beat and nothing else.
You just did the whole.
I have 20 minutes
somewhere
scene.
else.
I have no idea what went on.
Yeah.
And at the end, she's sitting on the couch and his head's in her lap.
Yeah.
And the lights are coming down. And we used to have little communications at that moment, which is, how was that? and she that's really good. And I wasn't sure I said all the lines. I didn't know.
Yeah, sure.
But it goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But, and later on, I talked to Squeaky, right? And she said, yeah, I saw you in the hallway. I said, yeah. She said, you look like a cornered animal.
Oh, wow. And you felt like it too.
I felt like it. And the thing is these are, and we talk about acting and we talk about all this stuff. This is the shit you want, right? And I was not aware of most of it.
Yeah.
I had learned the lines, and I knew the blocking, and I knew what I had to do, and all of that. Supposedly we're here to feel for people, and I don't think that's the way to approach it. You cannot start acting. You cannot do acting from a feeling perspective. Oh, I need to feel this here. I need to feel that here. All of that's got to, the life or whatever, or the situation has to inform you. You can't inform it. You have to put yourself in the situation. Mm-hmm. Or ask for something and see, right? And God. That was always the first show I ever did on Broadway. The first show I did on Broadway was The Bacchae, directed by Michael Kokianis, who had written the translation. And Michael, I don't know if you know who he is. He was a Greek director and producer. He directed the film Zorba the Greek and all that stuff. And he big deal in Greece. And he was an interesting man. Chased me around the desk. Oh my God. And so here he is. And Irini Papas. Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay. Irini Papas, next to Melina McCurry, is the two great 20th century Greek actresses.
Okay.
And she had a real film career. I go to the audition to read for Pentheus. Pentheus is the king. And I prepared it, blah, 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 blah. And I had this rule, you know, because auditions were so stressful that if they talked to you after and you finished, it was a no.
Okay.
But if they just said thank you, you had a shot.
Okay.
And the psychology of that is that you come and you've auditioned for them and they can't give you anything and they feel bad, so they talk to you.
Okay.
Okay. So I go to this audition and I read for Pentheus, and Michael says, no, we want you to read another part.
Okay.
So he hands me the second messenger. The second messenger is not just a walk-on. All the messenger parts in Greek theater were given to the best actors because they have to describe all the offstage action. And in this case, this is a guardsman who had gone as a bodyguard to the king, who's gone into the woods to see, dressed as a woman, to see his mother and the Bacchae, who are these crazed women having sexual rights or some fucking thing, and under the spell of Dionysus. And they see him and they tear him limb from limb. And the mother tears her own son limb from limb, thinking it's a lion that they've fallen upon. Right? And this guard, who's witnessed all this, turns around and runs back into the city. And the chorus says, what's going on? And he tells the story. It's 9-minute speech. Right? I had a 9-minute speech. This is my Broadway debut.
Wow.
Right? And then as soon as you finish, in comes the queen holding the head of her son, thinking it's the head of a lion. Her father then comes and talks her to sanity, and she realizes what she's holding.
Yeah.
And the play ends.
Wow.
Okay? So, fine. So I go to the audition for Pentheus, for the king, the guy who's head, blah. And he says, read this other part. And so I go upstairs at Circle in the Square, and I read it, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I had time to read it through once. And they said, come back in, come back in. And I read it through once. And I didn't say, I need 5 minutes more. You never do.
No.
It's like,
just go. Just go.
And I went out, and my back was to the wall. I had been out of work for some months, and I was sort of very depressed. And I was angry. And I went out, and I stood in the middle of that stage, and I started reading it. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't reading anymore. I was conscious of this. It was just happening. And it was long description, blah, 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 blah. And it was just, boom. And I thought to myself, well, while I'm doing it, they're not going to get anything better than this.
Wow,
right?
You knew.
I knew, right? And I finish, and there's a slight pause, and then fucking Michael starts talking.
Oh, and
he's like, oh my God, blah, 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 you blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking, oh yeah, and I'm smiling and waving, and I'm thinking, fuck you.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, I can't do any better than this. I can't. This is it.
That's
This
it.
is all of it. And no, it's a no. Right? And so I left, and to get off the stage, you have to go up. The house is very steep. So I go up to the rim of the theater, and there's a guy who had been on the rail watching all this. And subsequently, I found out he was a stage manager. And as I passed him, and I know he'd watched the audition, and as I passed him, and he had watched the conversation afterwards, I said, well, I didn't get that one. And then they called me and said I had it. And that was my first Broadway show.
Wow.
Yeah. And the first night, my family's there. All this stuff, and recipe for disaster. Yeah. Right. And I kicked ass. It was great, and but I guess the point of it was, as we got into rehearsals, I did not know how to do this. This thing is a man who's been terrified. He's seen his king torn to pieces. He's got to come back and describe it. Yeah. How do you do that? I didn't know how to do it. Okay. And I thought, well, you can fake it. Right. And I got very upset because I thought, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I didn't know how to do it. Okay. And so I finally decided I wasn't going to do it. Okay. That it wasn't up to me. It was a very Alcoholics Anonymous moment.
Okay. Okay.
Which was, the image I had was that I was a projector.
Okay.
And that I was putting the story up here, and I was watching it as I was projecting it, and the audience was watching it, and if I did it well, it stayed up there, and the audience, it just held there, and then I got out. Because, and by the end of it on opening night, I was weeping and all this stuff, which I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And I got exit applause, my first exit, my opening night on Broadway, right? And then, but right after that, Irini has to come on with the head, right? She stepped on that like, which I don't blame her.
Yeah.
I loved her. She was great. But she
Go.
came in a lot faster that night.
So I want to tie this idea of you as the messenger. That's interesting. You as the messenger. Wow, that was a little deeper than I intended.
No, well, it's true.
You as the second messenger in the Bacchae on Broadway, being kind of the messenger and allowing yourself to be the cello, like we talked about earlier. How do you think about that? Because it seems like you found this cool way to free yourself by being a channel, like some artists talk about.
And first of all, I'd like to say you'll notice that both of these stories have a lot to do with terror.
Yeah.
Right? And that enormous fear that we all have, or at least I have.
Yeah.
Right? Of that's based on all kinds of things. And that's an engine. That's something that drives you. And also, if you're doing something and nothing is working, then you're driven to perhaps, doing things well, finding the way things should be is never happy.
Comfortable.
It's never comfortable. It's never easy. I mean, you can say all that shit, but it's true. And that point of being able to let yourself go, take yourself out of it. You think, how can I take myself out of it? I'm the actor. That's the problem. That's precisely the problem. And you have to be willing to be ashamed. But there's an interesting thing, or rather shame, which most actors have a deep sense of, whether they want to admit it or not, is really a part of it. John Gielgud said that there's two things in acting: there's shame and there's glory. And counterintuitively, you feel ashamed when you remember yourself. We think it's all about self-aggrandizement. It's not. You find the glory when you forget yourself. And you think about it. John Gielgud was really interesting because he was actually a very practical actor, even though he was totally gifted. But that's really true, is that the only thing you're ever going to get out of all of this that's worth it is when you forget yourself totally. And you think, no, I can't do that. I want the payoff, right? I want the Oscar.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so not that.
Yeah.
Now this I mean, like every other actor, I have an Oscar acceptance speech squirreled away.
There's a beautiful tension of, I want to be in that place, but I don't want to be the person that wants to be in that place.
In American culture, it's like part of our concept of God is, like if you had a choice between winning the Best Actor Oscar and going up there on the stage and had an acceptance speech, or being led into heaven by St. Peter, it's the same thing. Yeah. The problem, there is no solution, but it is well to figure out what the problem is, at least. The problem is exactly that, which is since you are the cello and the music and the player all at the same time, you have to A, respect that, and B, get out of the way of it. And then things come to you. Roy used to say this. He used to say, you've got to find a way to get it to come to you, not to go to it. That whatever it is, or the business, get the business to come to you. He talked about that, which was interesting. And he made no distinction between the business and acting itself and dealing with anybody.
Do you still feel that terror? Or you've done so much work. Do you still feel the terror, or do you feel the adrenaline?
It's different now. I'm an old person, and it's different. But I find that I have to examine where I am standing in the wings and what is actually going on right now, as opposed to what I think should be going on.
Okay. And
that's my business. That's the other thing you've got to tell another actor, which is it's your business. It's not, it's, we talk all this away. I mean, we're doing it here. We all want to be the hero of our own story. We all want to sound good. We all want to do all this. I mean, I'm doing it right now, right? But you can talk it away. And so it's much better to describe or figure out the problem, the problem, than it is to come, oh, this is how you do this. Nobody fucking knows how to do anything. That's why everybody keeps trying it. That's why there is no formula. What you want to do is create a problem and make it worse.
That makes sense to me as a writer. Create your darlings and then put them in awful situations.
Or make it worse. Or do whatever you can to make it worse.
Yeah. So it's kind of as an actor running into the fire.
We all want it to be easy. And so you've got to take what you want off the table. It's not an issue. The point is not what I want.
Okay.
It's what do I want to do, How
do you distinguish between those two?
Hard.
Okay.
I mean, largely by concentrating on the other person.
Okay.
Right? At least
it sounds a little like you're thinking like, it's not how you want to feel.
No, you can't start with feeling. You can't say, this is how I want to feel. Then you're sunk.
Yeah.
You will feel. They will feel.
Yeah.
It's all about feeling. We're feeling merchants.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But if you start there, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You have to.
Or maybe it's like how you actually want to feel as opposed to trying to make yourself feel it.
Feel is a bad word.
Okay.
What do I want?
Yeah. But what do you want though?
Well, you want to accept it.
Feel?
Yeah, but there's a lot of harder things you want.
I think it's that. I think that feeling does have a place in this, but we're putting it in
but you can't
we're putting
talk
it in
about
the wrong spot.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Oh no.
Yeah.
Everything we do is about feeling. It's about emotion. It's about and one of the things we're doing is we're trying to create emotion and all that stuff. But how do you do that? How do you do that without falling prey to something?
Right.
And you do it either out of sheer energy or going after the other person.
Yeah.
But but none of us can be trusted with our feelings. I mean, fuck. that's terrible. I'm not that happy about those.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for going on the ride with me.
Okay.
I don't think we've solved anything here.
No, we haven't solved a fucking thing.
No, I'm far more confused.
Yes.
Thank
you.
There
it is.
And it's delightful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So I think the next step would be, what is your creator's challenge for my audience? What is something they can do in under 10 minutes that they can do with whatever resources they have right now that will shake them up creatively?
Well, how to put this? If you're working on, let's talk about being an actor.
Okay.
If you're an actor and you're working on a part,
try
to look at it, either working on it yourself or going into rehearsal and take out the notion of doing it right.
Yeah.
Right? And see if it gives you any power in the room. The only thing you need to do is to learn the lines and stop trying to do and examine where you might be trying to do it right. Because most people, I think, they do all kinds of things that they think are just what you have to do, and they're trying to do it right. There is no right way to do anything. Right? And the more trouble that makes for everybody else, the better. Then maybe they'll leave you alone. All right. There's a lot of that, which is you're trying to be so dangerous that they just leave you the hell alone, as opposed to, servicing the paradigm, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, falling into the expected pattern.
Yeah, or well, we better do this.
People pleasing and getting it right and perfectionisty. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I mean, kind of connects back to the idea of being the cello and opening that channel and not forcing something and not trying to be right.
Not trying to be right. We all want to do it right. I mean, a part of this is like I teach kids, and so they're all like, "Did I do it right? Did I do it right?" Especially some, and I don't fucking know. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's more interesting if you kind of explore.
But it's also more interesting if that's not the question.
Oh, yeah. Like, we're not talking about that. Yeah.
The question is something else. What are we doing? What is narrative for? Except to, in one way, I mean, I have this theory, it's probably bullshit, but I think human beings like narrative because that's how their brains are built. Mm-hmm. Your brain tells itself a story, which has a beginning, a middle, and end, and has this and that's all those rules we have. That it just goes back to thought structure, right? And narrative works best when it copies thought. That's when Shakespeare works best. Shakespeare's like thought. If you think of it like thought as opposed to words, it operates differently. Yeah,
and it's kind of taking the senses of how we perceive the world and adding meaning to it by creating a narrative.
Yeah, and that's an imposition. That's we're creating a narrative. We always are. It's all just another story piled onto another story, piled onto another story, right?
There's another Rumi quote that comes to mind that I'm sure I'll get wrong, but it's something like, beyond thoughts of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And
yes.
I love that.
Did you send me that? Because I read that like yesterday.
Wow.
I read
it's just
that.
In the air. Speaking of meeting you in the field, I think people should look at your IMDb because we didn't even talk about any film or TV that you've done, and you have such a fascinating career.
It's a stupid career.
I love it.
When I think about my career.
Okay.
I mean, what my career is worth is conversations like this.
I think that's what I really admire and love about your career is because, like, I am actually, don't tell anybody, I'd still love it. I'm less excited about the Oscar nomination speech. I'm more excited about being in the inside of an exciting life and having those experiences. Yeah. And I think that you really have done that.
What I want is somebody to call me and say, "You've got to be in Prague tomorrow morning." I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
And a couple of times something like that happened.
Yeah.
It was fabulous.
I am very drawn to the breadth and width of experience, and I see that you've had that, and I love your stories about it. Join the community and share your creative challenges on Instagram and Facebook at Creators Cafe by Kika Labs. And also check out my website, kikalabs.com, KIKALABS.com, to sign up for the mailing list so you always know when a new podcast is released, and to check out my coaching and digital courses to help you be a more confident and joyful creator.